Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. We are headed into our final segment of the day. We are going to be talking some NBA from last night. So we'll be covering a variety of different games that took place. We will start off, it wasn't all too much of a game, but we did have the Philadelphia 76ers face off against the New York Knicks on primetime TV. And this was OG Anunoby's first game back. He had missed the past month or so with an injury, so he returns. And I don't want to say that this matchup against the 76ers is necessarily the biggest test in the world in terms of the defense. We know how much better the Knicks have been defensively this season when they have had OG Anunoby on the court. Some of the on-off numbers with him have been ridiculous, but again, there has also been a lack of real sample size with that. So something that we're going to continue to monitor. The 76ers have been really struggling as of late, and it's sort of hard to take a win against. And granted, they were smothering the 76ers all game. They only allowed 79 points. This is just coming off of this past weekend where neither team reached 80 in the 76ers actually won with 79 points, while the Knicks only put up 73. But this is the Sixers' third straight game not being able to reach 100 points. So again, I wouldn't say that this is the best measuring stick in the world, but for Anunoby, it was good to see him back out on the court. I think that he's a very nice player. He fits exactly what the Knicks are hoping to do, and he looked pretty good. He was moving around really well. It's not like he carries this massive load offensively, but he was able to score 14 points. He was 6 of 11 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3. And again, I just think that there's a level of the switchability with him on the defensive side of the floor that is so valuable for the Knicks. And I have a hard time with them because I felt like they were on their way to potentially being in the realm of contention when the trade deadline hit. But I do worry that we're maybe a little too... There's absolutely going to be a tough matchup for any team in the first round or the second round, but with the lack of experience that they've gotten to have as a unit as a whole, I think it's hard to imagine that they knock off maybe the top contenders in the Eastern Conference, even though what are those top contenders in the Eastern Conference? I still believe in the Boston Celtics, who had a big-time win last night while missing a couple of their key players. Again, against the Jazz, who were also missing a couple of guys, so not going to over-celebrate that win either. But you also look at the Milwaukee Bucks, which I suppose we can transition into here, where the Bucks started out 6-0 after the All-Star break, were playing some tremendous defense, allowing an average of, I believe it was just over 98 points per game in those wins. But we acknowledged, at least on this show at the time, that the level of competition wasn't necessarily too high and that they were going to begin getting a little bit more tested. They had one of the hardest strengths of schedule in the second half of the season, and it was going to be a good opportunity for them to establish themselves more, but they have not been great. Now, a couple wins against the Clippers is nice for them, but they got ran out of the building against the Warriors last week. They lost to a LeBron James-less Lakers team over the weekend, and last night the Kings absolutely ran it up on them. In all of these losses, defense has been the issue, allowed over 120 points in each of these games, and I don't want to harp on it too much necessarily because 120 points isn't necessarily uncommon in the NBA, but just like I was giving the attention to them being able to limit some of these teams as much as they were, the defense is what's under a microscope for Milwaukee as this season progresses, and it definitely was not there last night. The transition game continues to be a big struggle for them, and I just worry that when they don't have it on offense, it's going to be very difficult for them to compete in a 7-game series, especially when you have, granted, it was just one night, but performances like what Damian Lillard put up last night, going just 2 of 12 from the field, and he has just had, a handful of these games where he sort of disappears. I don't know if in a series against the Celtics or against the Knicks, who are going to be all over him, that it is cause for concern, I believe, with them. And I'm not saying I would rule them out by any means, but I was definitely building myself up in terms of talking myself into them as a contender, and there is a reason why I feel like they hover around maybe a third-tier contender, definitely under the Celtics and Nuggets, probably under the Clippers as well. And then each of those other teams on that tier necessarily have their big-time flaws, and the Bucks are a flawed team. But we also know that the ceiling can be there with them, so I'm definitely not ready to write them out. But other games in the NBA last night, the one that I was most fixated on was the Pacers versus Thunder game. The Pacers recently got the news this past week that Benedict Mathurin is going to be out for the rest of the season, which is a big-time blow. He's someone who has been in and out of the starting lineup for the past couple seasons, but it seemed like when they moved on from Buddy Hield, it was because they were hoping that Mathurin could take on a bigger role for them, and he was playing really well this season. I'm very high on him as a player, but this one stinks for them. And it's not that the Pacers were finals contenders this season, but they are in a position where they can find themselves overachieving, winning a playoff series potentially, and this one does hurt. That being said, they were able to hand it to the Thunder in this one. Just a really rough offensive game for the Thunder for a lot of the game. I mean, things did turn a little bit more into the game we were expecting around the third quarter, but the Thunder scored just 17 points in the first quarter. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander really struggled in this game. He was just 12 of 27 on the night. I was tracking it for a while. I didn't go back and actually look at the final stats with him, which I can probably do as we go here, but yeah, he had just one made shot outside of the paint in this one. Really struggled, and you could see him. He hit a floater at one point in the third quarter, and he looked up to the sky as in, thank God, but things didn't really turn around from there. Now, the third quarter, like I mentioned, is where some of these teams started coming together. I actually thought that we saw flashes of Gordon Hayward actually playing some meaningful minutes for them, just doing the Gordon Hayward things that you would expect. It's not like he's this elite creator by any means, but he knows how to get to the rim. He had a really nice backdoor cut that got him a look at the rim as well. He turned in a pretty nice performance. They were trusting him playing down the stretch of this game. Now, Jalen Williams, J-Dub, was not playing in this game, so that contributed to it as well. But I did think that he just played into the system of the Oklahoma City Thunder pretty well. Do I expect him to play 30 minutes in a playoff game? No, definitely not. But he is one of the few older veteran guys on this roster, and had some nice flashes last night is all I'm saying. I did also want to talk about Chet Holmgren briefly, where it's not like he was incredible offensively, but I really do think that he doesn't. It's tough because with the Thunder, we've seen them in these games, especially against the Lakers as of recently when they were stopped in that game. It's really tough for the Thunder when he is basically their only big man getting minutes. I mean, Jalen Williams, the other one, J-Will, sorry about repeating this, but J-Will has provided some better minutes, but it doesn't seem like the Thunder trust him all that much, and it's a lot of Chet taking on the responsibilities of being the full-time paint protector, which he is very capable of doing. But as we get closer to the playoffs, I feel like I have this level of frustration that I wish the Thunder went out and got another big man as well, whether it was Daniel Gafford, who is somebody I repeatedly mentioned on the show prior to the deadline. I think if they really wanted to go out and swing on such as a Nick Claxton, I would have been really in for that. But they stick it out with Chet Holmgren, who he is not a bad option at all. I thought that he did a really good job in certain instances, especially in the fourth quarter. It was their offense that wasn't able to get it done for them. But the Pacers do score 72 points in the paint in this matchup, and I just feel like that's something that is really causing me hesitation in terms of considering the Thunder a big-time contender, is the fact that I don't think that they have the size to compete with some of the other teams in the Western Conference, specifically when you look at the Denver Nuggets. But this was a nice game for the Pacers. I've been very fixated on the Thunder in this. Miles Turner was good in this game. Again, like I said, they really carved out the Thunder on the inside, which was a big-time move for them. I thought that Halliburton sort of returned to his form somewhat in the fourth quarter as well. It just seemed like every time the Pacers, who were up big in the first half, the Thunder were trailing for the majority of the game, fought their way back into it late in the third quarter, but every time the Thunder really got in good position, the Pacers, they just couldn't get the stops, and I think that speaks more so to the really nice brand of offensive basketball that the Pacers play, so I do want to give them credit for that. Now, final note here, I just wanted to address the Minnesota Timberwolves Clippers game, where the Clippers were up by 22 points in the first half, and then we had a little bit of an injury scare with Kawhi Leonard. He played the entire first quarter, all 12 minutes. He then, after the break, went into the locker room early and left the arena before the game even wrapped up. This was a little bit scary. He had just missed the game prior against the Milwaukee Bucks. That was with a groin injury. This one was supposedly back spasms. So shouldn't be a real serious injury, you would have to imagine. But this is also just a little bit of the scare with the Clippers, is that anytime some of these guys could go down with some of the injury history they have. And when that happened, the Timberwolves took over. They didn't have anybody to guard Anthony Edwards, who exploded really from the second quarter on. He was just 3 of 8 in the first quarter, and Edwards finished 15 of 29. So he really elevated his game, scored 37 points. He was asked about it. He said he just saw a bunch of mismatches. And I think part of the reason why is the fact that Kawhi Leonard was not on the court for the Clippers, and this is a Clippers team that isn't elite defensively. So that is a little bit of a concern for me. It's just one game. It's the regular season. It's in this stretch where we're seeing a lot of injuries pop up. Maybe it was more so precautionary, but it is just a little bit of a reminder as we get closer to the playoffs that really hoping for a healthy Kawhi Leonard playoffs, because we've been deprived of it for years, and I do think he is one of at least my personal favorite playoff performers, but it's a matter of, is he actually going to be available? And we won't know that until we see it come May, June, and such. But that is all we have time for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Helps us out a lot, and we will be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock, so we will see you then. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go.